bienvenidas a todos, bienvenidas a todas. Muchas gracias por estar acá. Este webinario está organizado en conjunto de Justice con Deuda por Clima. Estamos muy felices de tenerlos por acá y de bienvenir a estos increíbles presentadores que hoy nos van a traer historias de resistencia, historias de lucha contra estas instituciones que nos continúan subyugando. Hoy nos unimos para repudiar los 80 años desde el establecimiento del Fondo Monetario Internacional y del Banco Mundial, instituciones que han moldeado las políticas económicas globales que están dominadas por el norte global. Este seminario web reúne a activistas y expertos para explorar los impactos duraderos de las políticas del FMI y del Banco Mundial, y así como los esfuerzos de resistencia en curso y la urgente necesidad de marcos económicos alternativos. En lugar de fomentar un cambio progresivo, nosotras sabemos que estas instituciones continúan empeorando la crisis climática al empujar a nuestros países del sur global hacia la extracción de combustibles fósiles, la agroindustria y la deforestación. Esto con el fin de generar las divisas necesarias para pagar estas deudas ilegítimas, perpetuando así la dependencia y obstaculizando el progreso y el desarrollo justo de nuestros territorios. Y esto se logra a través de la dominación de nuestros territorios mediante la deuda. Nosotras sabemos que estas instituciones de Bretton Woods y sus estructuras de poder arraigadas necesitan ser desmanteladas. Para nosotras es claro que el FMI y el Banco Mundial no son ninguna parte de la solución, sino son una parte esencial del problema. Sabemos que han mantenido a los países del sur global bajo su dominio colonial de deuda durante décadas, atrapándonos en un ciclo de explotación, degradación ambiental y crisis económica. Y hoy nos reunimos para decir que 80 años de deudocracia colonial son suficientes. Y nosotras en conjunto exigimos la cancelación inmediata e incondicional de la deuda del sur global para así allanar juntos el camino para una transición justa y autodeterminada. Y sin más, pues le paso el micrófono a Diani, que va a darle espacio para presentar a nuestros increíbles presentadores de esta noche. Bienvenidos a todos y muchas gracias por estar acá. Diani, te doy el micrófono.
Yeah, thank you so much, Diana. I really appreciate it. And thank you so much for the great introduction. So I will right away, I'll go to introducing our speakers of the day, and welcome everyone to this webinar. Please feel free to ask your questions, type in the chats, and we will really appreciate to interact with you. So our first speaker is Mr. Tariq. Tariq Toussaint. Pardon? Yeah, our first speaker is Mr. Tariq. So Tariq is a doctor in political science from the universities of Liège and Paris, Paris 8. He's also a spokesman for CADTM International and a member of the Science Council of ATTAC France. He's an author of several books. One book is the Banque Mondiale, which has a lot of history, capitulation, and he is also an author of Greece 2015, and among other books. He's also a co-author with Damian Millet of the books Capital AAA, Audit, Annulation, Outre Politique, and La Date. The latter book he won with the Political Book Prize awarded by Liège Political Book Fair. Yeah, so that is Tariq. Tariq, if you are in, you can just wave so that the people can be able to see you.
Do you see me? Est-ce que vous me voyez?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you so much, Tariq.
Bon, I will speak in French. Voy a hablar en francés, entonces ustedes tienen que conectarse con la interpretación. Donc, je vais parler en français. Donc, je suis très content de participer à cette activité en compagnie des deux autres conférenciers et conférencières. Et donc, pour présenter rapidement la Banque mondiale et le Fonds monétaire international qui célèbrent 80 années d'existence, je vais essayer de résumer les traits fondamentaux de ces institutions. Elles ont donc été créées avant la fin de la Seconde Guerre mondiale par les puissances occidentales. La réunion de négociation a eu lieu aux États-Unis. Les États-Unis voulaient deux structures leur permettant de dominer dans la mesure du possible le monde après la fin de la guerre. Les ennemis des puissances occidentales, à ce moment-là, l'Allemagne nazie et le Japon, n'ont pas fait partie de la Banque mondiale. Par contre, comme l'Union soviétique avait été un allié dans l'axe contre la puissance nazie, fasciste italienne et le Japon, l'Union soviétique était invitée aux premières négociations. Néanmoins, c'est très clairement les puissances occidentales, principalement les États-Unis et la Grande-Bretagne, Grande-Bretagne qui avait encore son empire à ce moment-là, puisque l'Inde et le Pakistan et les autres pays de l'Asie du Sud, ainsi que les colonies britanniques d'Afrique, étaient toujours dans l'empire britannique. À elles seules, comme puissance, les États-Unis et la Grande-Bretagne détenaient 50% des voix dans la Banque mondiale et le Fonds monétaire international, à l'origine. Et donc, c'est avec d'abord les changements de relations avec l'Allemagne dans les années 50 et le Japon, que le Japon et l'Allemagne ont adhéré à la Banque mondiale et au FMI. Et puis, avec les indépendances, quasiment plus d'une centaine de pays ont successivement adhéré à la Banque mondiale et au FMI. La Banque mondiale et le FMI ont commencé avec une quarantaine de membres, juste après la Seconde Guerre mondiale. Et aujourd'hui, la Banque mondiale a 188 membres et le Fonds monétaire international a 189 pays membres. Néanmoins, jusqu'à aujourd'hui, ce sont les puissances occidentales qui dominent les décisions et les politiques décidées par ces deux institutions. Comme vous le savez certainement, jusqu'à aujourd'hui, jusqu'au moment où je parle, les présidents qui se sont succédés, les hommes qui se sont succédés à la Banque mondiale, étaient tous, et actuellement c'est encore le cas, de nationalité des États-Unis. Ces présidents désignés par le président des États-Unis ont donc largement suivi les intérêts de Washington. Du côté du Fonds monétaire international, c'est un accord tacite entre les puissances européennes occidentales et les États-Unis. C'est un Européen ou une Européenne qui a le droit de diriger le Fonds monétaire international. Donc, au cours de leurs 80 années d'existence, il n'y a jamais eu une femme ou un homme issu du Sud global qui a présidé la Banque mondiale ou le Fonds monétaire international. Et dans le cas de la Banque mondiale, les présidents, donc tous des hommes et tous de nationalité américaine, provenaient soit du monde de la banque privée, soit du secteur de la politique de la défense, donc de la politique du complexe militaro-industriel des États-Unis, soit directement de l'administration et du gouvernement américain. Il y a des figures emblématiques comme Robert McNamara, qui a d'abord été le CEO.
If you join the meeting, could you please mute yourself? If you join the webinar, please unmute yourself.
Okay. Eric, please try to fix your internet as you get back. But thank you so much for this great introduction. The people now know you and they've heard from you, and we'll be getting back to you shortly. And for those who are just joining in right now, please, if you want to set your interpretation, there is a globe just down at the bottom. Click on that globe. You will see interpretation. Click on the interpretation. There are different languages. Click the language of your choice and join us in listening and learning. Thank you so much. So at this point, I would like to briefly introduce our second speaker in the session. Our second speaker will be Buenaventura from Asia People's Movement and on Debt and Development from Philippines. Mai works with the Asian People's Movement on Debt and Development, a regional alliance based in the Philippines that focuses on people-centered development, economic and environmental rights, and justice as its contribution to social transformation. In particular, she manages the debt justice and green economic rebuilding of APMDD, which sustains a long-standing struggle for debt cancellation, especially of the illegitimate debts. So, Maya, if you're in the meeting, please just wave so that people can know you. Then just say maybe 2 to 3 words because we will get back to you. Maya, please welcome.
Hello, everyone, and so happy to be here to be able to share and learn from all of you as well.
Yes. Thank you so much, Mai. My third speaker for the day is Farooq Tariq from Kissan Rabita Committee in Pakistan. Farooq is the General Secretary, the Secretary General or the General Secretary of Pakistan, Kissan Rabita Committee. This is the Pakistan Peasants Coordination Committee, which is a network of 30% organizations. PKRC is formerly a member of La Visa Comparisena, and he's also the executive committee member of the Asian People's Movement on Debt and Development. He's also an advisor of the South Alliance for Poverty Eradication, SAAPE. So Farooq, please feel very much welcome, and feel free to unmute and say hi to everyone. Just maybe some 2 or 3 words or few sentences, and we'll get back to you. Welcome, Farooq.
Thank you very much for introducing me, and I see very great friends and comrades in this webinar. So hope to see you and speak later. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Farooq. So members, that is the team of speakers that we have, a team of very knowledgeable people with vast experience who have worked in the space of debt and issues debt for a very long period of time. So stay tuned, listen to them, and I know we will be able to learn so much from them, and then learn also so much from what we've been having. So at this point, I would like directly to go on, but before I go on, I want to remind the people who are just joining in about the interpretation. So at the top, at the bottom of your screen, you will be able to see round globe. The globe is, I don't know, it's It's just there at the bottom where we have several icons showing different things. So if you just click on that globe, you'll be able to see different languages, and you can click on the language that you want for your interpretation. And if you are stuck, please feel free to write in the chat. We will be able to guide you from there. So once again, welcome so much. And now we will go direct to the session. And I will go direct to the first question. And my first question will go to our first speaker. Our first speaker is Eric. I don't know if Eric is back. Eric, can you be able to hear me?
Yes, I hear you.
Okay, yeah. So our first question to you would be discuss the history, origin, lack of democracy in IMFWB, and their role in the past debt crisis. Welcome, Eric.
Yes. Merci bien. Donc, la Banque mondiale et le Fonds monétaire international sont des instruments mondiaux au service des grandes puissances occidentales, principalement les États-Unis et les puissances de l'Europe occidentale. On peut y ajouter le Japon. Ces deux institutions suivent des objectifs principalement politiques. Le modèle économique qu'ils appliquent est au service d'objectifs politiques, à savoir maintenir la domination du système capitaliste mondial sur la planète et des puissances économiques qui dominent le système capitaliste mondial. La Banque mondiale a 188 membres, le Fonds monétaire international a 189 pays membres. Les pays du Sud sont tout à fait sous-représentés. Par exemple, l'ensemble des pays africains, il y a un peu moins de 50 pays d'Afrique subsaharienne. Ils détiennent ensemble, alors que la population de ces pays représente 1 milliard d'habitants, 1000 millions d'habitants, ils n'ont que 5% des voix au sein de la Banque mondiale et au sein du Fonds monétaire international. Tandis que les États-Unis, à eux seuls, détiennent 15% des voix. Les principales puissances européennes occidentales réunies détiennent un peu moins de 20% des voix. L'Arabie saoudite, qui est un pays peu peuplé, mais un allié stratégique des États-Unis, détient à elle seule 3% des voix, c'est-à-dire presque autant que l'Inde, qui a 1400 millions d'habitants. La Chine, qui a augmenté maintenant sa représentation à l'intérieur de la Banque mondiale et du FMI, représente 6%. Donc elle est toujours, comme l'Inde, et évidemment comme les pays d'Afrique, tout à fait sous-représentée par rapport aux grandes puissances. Alors, c'est très clair que la Banque mondiale et le Fonds monétaire international ont joué un rôle fondamental au moment des indépendances des années 50, 1950 et des années 1960 pour convaincre les gouvernements des pays qui obtenaient leur indépendance d'abandonner des tentatives de modèles autocentrés répondant aux besoins et aux spécificités de leur population afin d'adopter le modèle tout à fait dominé par l'idée d'extraire des ressources naturelles, exporter des produits agricoles tropicaux sur le marché mondial, abandonner toute idée d'industrialisation avec diversification. Et donc, la Banque mondiale et le FMI ont cherché à conduire les pays dans renforcer leur dépendance par rapport au marché mondial dominé par les puissances économiques qui avaient une technologie et une industrie fortement diversifiées. Et pour pouvoir influencer les gouvernements, il y a eu deux types de politiques. La main dure, comme politique, c'est-à-dire la déstabilisation, le soutien à des coups d'État, à des putschs militaires. Ça a commencé dès 1953 avec le renversement du premier ministre iranien, Mossadegh, qui voulait nationaliser les entreprises pétrolières. Puis ça a été le renversement de Arbenz, Jacobo Arbenz, le président du Guatemala. Et la liste, elle est énorme. Bien sûr, dans le coup d'État au Brésil en 1964, le soutien à Mobutu en 65, le soutien à Ferdinand Marcos aux Philippines. Donc la liste des dictatures soutenues par la Banque mondiale de l'FMI est très importante. Mais quand donc ils utilisaient à la fois la force, et là, en liaison avec la CIA et avec des interventions militaires quand c'était nécessaire, et puis ils utilisaient la dette, prêter un maximum d'argent aux pays du Sud pour les rendre dépendants, pour les rendre soumis, y compris en étant d'accord avec de la corruption permettant l'enrichissement individuel de dirigeants locaux. Il fallait chaque fois essayer, du point de vue de la Banque mondiale et du FMI, de faire en sorte que des gouvernements qui voulaient des changements sociaux abandonnent le pouvoir, soient renversés, ou bien abandonnent leur choix politique pour reprendre les choix que voulaient la Banque mondiale, le FMI, les États-Unis et les puissances occidentales. Donc la dette a servi quelque part à créer parmi les gouvernements du Sud comme une sorte d'intoxication aux drogues, à la drogue de la dette. Et chaque fois que des gouvernements ont essayé de remettre ça en cause, et ça a eu lieu dès les années 50, bien sûr, avec, par exemple, Sukarno, qui a refusé de payer la dette aux Pays-Bas et qui a quitté la Banque mondiale et le FMI, donc Sukarno, le président de l'Indonésie. C'est arrivé également avec Lumumba, qui a refusé les dettes que la Belgique et la Banque mondiale voulaient lui léguer et qui a donc été assassiné en 61. Donc de nouveau là, il y a eu des tentatives très importantes. Certaines ont obtenu un succès, il faut bien le dire. La victoire de la révolution chinoise en 1949, la victoire de la révolution cubaine en 1959. Et c'est d'ailleurs la victoire de la révolution cubaine de 1959 qui a amené pour la première fois la Banque mondiale et le FMI à parler de lutte contre la pauvreté. Ils se sont dit que si ils ne parlaient pas de la réduction de la pauvreté et s'ils ne commençaient pas à soutenir des programmes pour construire des hôpitaux et dans certains cas pour soutenir quelques efforts de répartition des terres, le danger communiste, le danger révolutionnaire risquait de s'étendre à toute la planète. Donc, c'est un des effets de la révolution cubaine que la Banque mondiale du temps de John Fitzgerald Kennedy décide de parler de la réduction de la pauvreté. Mais tout ça pour reprendre le contrôle de la situation. Alors, l'hyper-endettement a amené la crise de la dette de 1982 et a permis à la Banque mondiale et au FMI de culpabiliser les pays du Sud global en disant qu'ils avaient mal utilisé l'argent qu'on leur avait prêté et que, en conséquence, ils devaient appliquer l'ajustement structurel. Et donc, on a vu se répandre à partir de 1982 les politiques d'ajustement structurel. On avait déjà appliqué un modèle dur néolibéral sous la dictature de Pinochet à partir de 1973 au Chili, mais c'est grâce à la crise de la dette, au fait que toute une série de pays se sont retrouvés en difficulté de paiement et ont fait appel au Fonds monétaire international pour avoir des crédits d'urgence. C'est grâce à ce mécanisme-là que le FMI et la Banque mondiale ont pu généraliser les politiques d'ajustement structurel. Et aujourd'hui, on voit qu'ils n'ont, ces deux institutions, malgré que de manière répétée, et leurs dirigeants affirment qu'ils ont changé de politique, si on analyse ce qui se passe depuis le début, depuis qu'a commencé la crise de la pandémie du coronavirus, on voit que le Fonds monétaire international a signé une centaine d'accords avec les pays du Sud. Et donc, mon ami et camarade Farooq Tariq va parler du Pakistan notamment. Il vient d'y avoir un accord signé entre le Fonds monétaire international et le Pakistan. Donc, il y a une centaine de nouveaux accords signés par le Fonds monétaire international depuis 4 ans, pour octroyer des crédits d'urgence à la condition d'appliquer une dose supplémentaire d'ajustement structurel, ce qui a provoqué dans les derniers jours la rébellion au Kenya, avec une cinquantaine de morts, ayant amené ensuite le gouvernement à retirer la mesure qui était tout à fait impopulaire. La répression aussi au Nigeria, on avait connu ça en Équateur. En fait, au niveau de tous les pays du Sud global, et y compris de certains pays européens, parce qu'il faut se rappeler que le Fonds monétaire international est intervenu directement en Grèce dans la crise grecque de 2010 et dans les pays de l'Est européen. Partout, on a généralisé des politiques néolibérales radicales d'ajustement structurel. Et donc, partout, ça produit des mêmes effets tout à fait contraires aux intérêts des populations. Alors, je termine en disant que ces institutions refusent de changer leur politique. Il est tout à fait illusoire de penser qu'on peut réformer ces institutions. Elles sont irréformables. Elles doivent être abolies. Elles doivent être remplacées par de nouvelles institutions mondiales. Par exemple, on peut penser à des initiatives de création de banques du Sud, comme 7 présidents d'Amérique latine avaient essayé de le faire sous le leadership de Chavez à partir de 2007 en Amérique du Sud. Il faudrait remettre sur le métier des initiatives alternatives et il faudrait reprendre la flamme de la campagne qui avait été lancée par Fidel Castro en 1985 dans la crise de la dette qui avait commencé en 82 pour dire que tous les peuples du Sud et leur gouvernement doivent s'unir pour refuser de payer la dette. Flambeau qui avait été repris par Thomas Sankara à partir de 1985, le président du Burkina Faso. Il faudrait absolument, nous, comme mouvements sociaux, comme mouvement anti-dette, relancer une dynamique puissante de mobilisation pour remettre en cause totalement la Banque mondiale et le FMI et montrer qu'on doit les remplacer et qu'on peut les remplacer. Merci beaucoup pour votre attention.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing those insightful sentiments, Eric. And as someone from the Global South and especially Africa, I'm so happy to hear you talk about Thomas Sankara. Indeed, he was a great fighter for us. So at this point, I'll move to the next speaker, but before I do that, I see people are still lost with the translation. Please, if you need translation, just go at the bottom of your screen you will see a globe, click on it, you will see translation, and then you can choose your preferred language. I don't know if someone can translate this. Diana, are you able to do the interpretation?
Hola a todos, a todos. Para los que tengan problemas con la interpretación, perdón, estaba escuchando mi propia interpretación. Para los que tengan problemas con la interpretación, recuerden que tenemos disponible esta presentación en inglés, en francés y en español. Pueden activar la interpretación con el globo que está hasta abajo. Cuando presionan el globo terráqueo de abajo de Zoom, pueden seleccionar el idioma en el que quieren escuchar esta presentación. Muchas gracias, Diani. Te regreso el micrófono.
Yeah, thank you so much, Diana. At this point, I will move to our second speaker, and our second speaker is Mae. And as I told you before, Mae has a lot of vast knowledge when it comes to issues debt, and in a long way, or in her longest period of time, she's been working around that with people from the Philippines. So please feel free to jump in, and I would like you to share with us. You examine the impacts of the IMF and the World Bank, their policies on people and economies in the global South, specifically around the climate crisis. Please welcome.
Yes, thank you, Diane, for the introduction, and thank you also for this opportunity. So I think a lot of us already are aware that the debt problem has not really gone away. And despite all these measures from the Group of Seven, the world's richest countries, they have shown failure to address the systemic nature of the debt problem. So we now see the debt crisis growing worse. And, several reports have already noted that an increasing number of countries with debt levels, for example, exceeding 60% of GDP, and also that debt service payments are now eating up more than 35% of the debt revenues, of budget revenues, and also that a lot of funds are going to debt service, and the governments are sacrificing budgets for health and education and social protection. So what is so tragic about this is that the same countries that are in debt crisis, and I'm not saying that the debt crisis is only now, because this has been like a permanent debt crisis from many decades ago that has not been resolved. But the countries that are now really facing this problem of debt and very narrow fiscal space are also the countries suffering from the worst impacts of climate change. And we know very well that Global South countries contributed very, very little. Pakistan, for example, is one of them, and Farooq may mention this later. And yet we are now facing more expensive borrowing costs, because that has become the knee-jerk reaction, as Eric said, the addiction to debt, that when there's crisis, our own governments that are also complicit and collaborative with the IMF and the World Bank, they always turn to borrowings. So there's almost, because of this pressure on addressing climate, there's also this pressure to access more loans to finance climate mitigation and adaptation. And we should also see this in the context that the rich countries have not complied with their obligation to provide public climate finance, as already established by the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities, recognizing that the rich countries were the ones who exceeded or abused the atmosphere, for which they have a responsibility to provide finance for climate action. But again, we see the IFIs, the IMF and the World Bank, pushing loans as a solutions to the crisis. So they ignore, or they purposively, do not recognize the justice issue in relation to the climate crisis. So if we look at some of the ways that the IMF and the World Bank have been intensifying the impacts of climate change, there are several ways. Of course, in decades past, there have been many projects funded by these institutions that contributed to the worsening of the climate crisis because there were fossil fuels or big dams and other projects that also dislocated communities and destroyed environments. So one of the ways is that they, despite their denials, they continue to provide loans for fossil fuel projects. And they also continue support for the fossil fuel industry. So they claim that they have moved away from bankrolling dirty energy projects, but the trend has been well established that they still do this. And they are involved in projects that do fossil fuel extraction, production, and infrastructure, such as funding coal-fired power plants, oil and gas extraction projects, and other infrastructure. So it's also well recognized that these activities directly contribute to more and more greenhouse gas emissions, which is already recognized as a key factor in the worsening climate emergency. So for example, in 2021, it provided 2.56 billion worth of conditional and unconditional finance for fossil fuel projects. Then in 2022, it supplied 3.7 billion of trade finance for oil and gas. Initial World Bank data in 2023 also shows that it provided finance worth $400 million for fossil fuel gas, because they are, raising gas as a supposedly clean alternative. So now we have this issue that the World Bank has become the host of the Loss and Damage Fund, and we in APMDD are have consistently said that if you look at the history of the World Bank, it's very plainly not consistent with the Loss and Damage Fund governing instrument that mandates aligning loss and damage fund activities with the Paris Agreement's objective to limit global temperature rise below 1.5 degrees Celsius. And another way is the loan conditionalities, no? So some of these loan conditionalities, they encourage foreign direct investment. They see that a way out for countries out of poverty is to bring in more big business and foreign investments. And the result is a lot of safeguards are not followed. And they also relax or reduce the environmental safeguards that resulting in increased pollution, more intense extraction, and of course, environmental degradation. And from 2010 to 2024, World Bank agencies such as IDA and the IBRD received $77 billion worth of interest payments from its loans for the Global South. And yet the COP28, the Conference of Parties, the 28th Conference of Parties, specified that grants and concessional loans should be the primary instruments of the Loss and Damage Fund. So this is now an issue that we're still facing, and we need to be vigilant about this, having the World Bank there as the host of the Loss and Damage Fund, which we fought for many, many years. And of course, these institutions also promote intensive agro-industrialization, which often involves the use of heavy chemicals, such as fertilizers and pesticides, which all the more contribute to greenhouse gas emissions. Large-scale agricultural projects supported by the World Bank also causes deforestation and land use changes, And of course, we know about the issue of land grabs faced by indigenous peoples and rural populations. So they are dispossessed in the process. No? And there's still support for very big infrastructure projects, such as dams and roads that also have significant environmental impacts, also leading to the displacement of communities, loss of livelihoods, and destruction of ecosystems, and of course, in the process, deepening inequality and impoverishment. Never have these institutions owned up to the responsibility or their culpability in climate worsening, fossil fuel subsidies, and project loans. We consider these loans actually as illegitimate debts for what they have done to people and the planet, and there was never any democratic consultation of any kind, very poor safeguards or safeguards that are not being followed at all. And we continue to receive policy prescription and advice from these institutions, our governments, I mean, also promoting industries and development paths that are moving us farther away from shifting to a post-carbon economies, no, that are shifting us away from renewables. And to close, the consequences of the World Bank projects coupled with IMF neoliberal policies have been devastating for the Global South. They leave behind in their 8 decades a trail of destruction and devastation. And of course, they are very much strongly supported by the group of 7 countries that actually own and control them, by continuing to promote the measures that these G7 countries espouse, solutions that are false, failed, and futile, and only bail out big corporations. So we, as part of our campaign, we have very strong positions on the call for canceling these illegitimate debts, especially fossil fuel debts, because of the way that this has contributed to and is continuing to contribute to the climate crisis. And we call for stronger, bolder mobilizations, also agreeing with what Eric earlier mentioned, that there must really be very broad and vigorous campaigns that call for the immediate and unconditional cancellation of these illegitimate debts. It is time for the IMF and the World Bank to be held accountable for their historical role in exacerbating the debt and climate crisis. And for this, we demand reparations. So that's why we say it's actually the IFIs that owe us in the Global South, because of the financial debt has actually been paid many times over, and much of which is actually or has actually led to a lot of harms for the people and the planet. So thank you very much, Diane.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mae. That was very, very insightful. And thank you so much for bringing in the G7 and the way they're really promoting the false solutions. And they do not really want to support the Global South when it comes to providing for them the financial support that they have agreed earlier to provide for them, so that they can at least be able to tackle climate change. So thank you so much for this insightful conversation. And I just want to urge participants, if you have any question, please drop it in the chat. Do not write it down so that you don't forget about it. But to our 2 speakers, that was very insightful. So I will call upon our 3rd speaker. And our 3rd speaker is a noble person who has also a vast experience. He has really worked so much when it comes to working with the Kissans and coordinating a number of committees. And I would really like to welcome him at this point. Farooq, Tariq, please welcome. And I would like you to share with us examples of resistance against the IMF and the World Bank policies in a specific country. We want to really try and relate to see if what Eric and Mai have talked about, can we really be able to resist this IMF and World Bank? So please feel free and jump in at this point. Welcome.
Thank you very much. And thank you, Eric, for giving the history and telling us about the role, the negative role these institutions have played with the lives of the people of the South in particular. And thank you, May, for laying down the context, general context, what has been meant for the countries of the South with the help, so-called help of these institutions. So I will just take up the impacts of IMF and World Bank on the lives of Pakistan and what it has been meant in Pakistan. Now, it's 73 years of independence, and Pakistan is now doing 23rd program with IMF. And so it's not 1, 2, 3, or 4, it's 23rd at this time. A new loan of $7 billion US is being negotiated. Now, I will just say about what impact it had on Pakistan. It has led to an economic disaster, poverty at a new height, historic inequalities in Pakistan at this time, price hike we have never seen earlier. And this is particularly for the last 2 years when IMF has put more pressure on Pakistan to implement all their conditionalities. And also, it has led to climate disasters because they were unable to pay what they promised, and also the way they have helped the fossil fuel projects, particularly in Pakistan. Also, the Chinese who have banned coal power plant in their own country and send the coal power plants to Pakistan. So Pakistan can burn the loss, Pakistan use those, and our climate should be more bad than the future. And there is more indirect taxation because of the conditionalities of the IMF. And there is a great money laundering. $14 billion US invested by Pakistanis in Dubai alone, which is recently been revealed. And this meant also more concessions for the rich and more indirect taxation on the poor. And this has been also led to research which told us $14 billion US concessions to the rich in the year 2021 in Pakistan. And then there's a class polarization at a historic high at this time. So the rich are bloody rich and poor are absolute poor. You can't really see how poverty has grown in the recent period in Pakistan. And also, we can see they are forcing the total implementation of the new liberal agenda in Pakistan and forcing Pakistan to continue on privatization. So these were just some of the impacts on Pakistan. I can give you some facts and figure what has happened so far. And before I can tell you, IMF and World Bank are very unpopular in Pakistan. Unlike Sri Lanka, where they had some illusions, there's no illusion. People are really angry and abusing these institutions because they have made the electricity maybe 10 times more expensive for every consumer. And gas and oil are also bloody expensive. And what government says always, what can we do? As Eric said earlier, they are addicted. And Pakistani ruling class is more addicted than any other country, maybe, because you always say, what other solutions you have? we are forced to go to IMF, and this is when they become very high, unpopular. What they say, we have saved Pakistan, but we have sacrificed our politics. So they don't care about becoming unpopular while implementing the conditionalities of IMF, because they know military establishment is behind them to bring them back to the power. And that's what it happened in 2024 general elections, where a highly unpopular regime brought back to Pakistan with a lot of election rig. So the ruling class is addictive of going back again and again to IMF and World. They have not learned a single lesson. They were a finance minister who said publicly, I am a Chicago boy. I have studied in America and I know what to do. So they are very proud to be Chicago boys. So we see at this time that IMF and World Bank are forcing the Pakistani government to accept some of the conditionalities which they will not do in normal conditions. Maybe behind that is geopolitics. Because Pakistan, when it's tilting towards China, when it go for CPEC, this is a China-Pakistan economic corridor, where over $40 billion has been invested in Pakistan. And we know about Chinese investment, it is not leading to any industrialization or any development in Pakistan. It's mainly infrastructure, and they want to bring their transportation on a much cheaper basis to all the other world. So when Pakistan is tilting towards China or Pakistan is going towards Russia, IMF conditionalities become more hard. So we see the so-called maneuvering of the institutions in the present political scenario, where one against the other are doing. So last time IMF said publicly, we're not giving you any loan because you may repay the debt of the Chinese bank. And that's another issue where China is not helping Pakistan, but giving loan, but they say on less hard condition than IMF. So they don't say we're giving you any aid, but it's more of a loan. And Pakistan is becoming more indebted to Chinese, to IMF, to World Bank, to industrialized countries and all that. So at this time, there is over 131 billion foreign debt, external debt of Pakistan. And PAK is a 23rd program of IMF. And recently they negotiated 7 billion IMF loan. And in I can tell you one more thing that, okay, Pakistan per capita, Pakistan's debt per capita had grown from 823 US dollar in 2011 to 1122 US dollar in 2023. A 36% increase in 12 years. At the same time, the country's gross domestic product GDP per capita had declined from 1296 US dollar per person in 2011 to 1223 US dollar in 2023. It's 6% decrease. So per capita income is decreasing despite all the support, but the per capita debt is increasing on historic high. So it has nearly doubled in the past period, and Pakistan has up till now borrowed 18 billion US dollar from World Bank for different projects, but it has maybe repaid more than double of that to the World Bank. And also Pakistan, the Aid International say that, okay, let me say one more thing. Yes, and Okay. IMF has, okay. So all these different facts and figure on foreign loan is been shown by the fact that it is the most the budget in budget is the most highest portion of the budget that is for repayment of the foreign loan, and you never hear the details. There is no audit. There is no public audit of these loans. So is on the top is the foreign loan. Then comes the military expenditures, and that really both of them goes over 60% of the total budget nationally. And then all the expenditures of the state comes, and very few money is left for development. So it's always that you have to take new loans for the development and so on. And also, may talk about loss and damage, which was agreed. Not a single penny has been paid to Pakistan up till now. All the climate disaster affectees are still waiting for any compensation, particularly in Sindh and Balochistan, the two provinces of Pakistan. And although it was approved in 2 years back in COP27 at Sharm el Sheikh, and then rediscussed at COP28 at Dubai, and also going to be discussed in Azerbaijan, Baku, in November this year. But till now, it's the World Bank who is managing on what they say on a transitional basis. But we know World Bank will never ever be agreeing on TORs which would be helping the countries of the South. So we reject this totally, that World Bank should manage loss and damage. It should be a new institution of the United Nations, and they should pay the $100 billion a year that they promised. They are not paying even $1 billion a year at this time. So it's all the lies and hypocrisies of the countries of the North which we are affected. Pakistan at this time is one of the poorest country of South Asia. His economy is declining. People are becoming more poor. There's a new classification of poor, and we see that the government has not abandoned or not learned any lessons, and they're still going on the same way. So I support the demand which May has presented and Eric has earlier spoken. We demand a total abolition of foreign debt of Pakistan. Pakistan should not pay any debt, and that money should be spent on the welfare, on the education, on the transportation, and on the health of the people. That's the only solution. And also delinking with the implementation of the new liberal agenda, which is taking place at a fast speed in Pakistan. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Farooq. That was very, very insightful. I think you really captured the concepts of anarchy very well, and you also tried to bring out the relationship between the IMF World Bank loans and loans from countries, developed countries like China. So I think for me, that was the highlight of everything, and I really appreciate. So at this point, before I can really get into the interactive question and answer session, I just realized that Farooq and Mai have really tried to talk about the IMF and conditionalities, if I may say, which are attached to the IMF and World Bank loans as compared to these loans from a country like China, and also everything around that from these loans that brings up geopolitics. So since our first speaker, Eric is so much vast and knowledgeable when it comes to politics. So I just, and he has also written a number of books. I just went through his books and I realized they are so much vast, they are so much knowledgeable when it comes to politics. So Eric, I just wanted you to help us strengthen this fact of geopolitics, anarchy in relation to the IMF, World Bank banks, and also World Bank loans, and also loans from developed countries like China. What is this type of relationship that exists in between there? Thank you, Eric.
Yeah. Thank you. Donc, je vais répondre en français. Donc, ceux qui ont besoin, if you need translation to English from French, please go to the translation. C'est clair que depuis une dizaine d'années, le panorama concernant les créanciers a fortement changé parce que la Chine est devenue le principal créancier public au niveau de la planète à travers ces banques étatiques qui prêtent de l'argent aux pays du Sud, aux pays d'Afrique, aux pays d'Asie et aux pays d'Amérique latine, et d'ailleurs aussi à quelques pays européens. Et on peut aussi ajouter que, alors que depuis 3 ans, 4 ans, une nouvelle crise généralisée de la dette est en train de s'étendre progressivement, il n'y a pas jusqu'ici multiplication de suspension de paiement parce que on a 2 acteurs très puissants qui interviennent. Le Fonds monétaire international, dont j'ai dit qu'il avait octroyé une centaine de prêts d'urgence depuis 4 ans, et Farooq vient de donner l'exemple du Pakistan. Et d'autre part, il y a la Chine, qui, pour éviter que les pays qui lui doivent de l'argent ne suspendent leurs paiements, la Chine, elle aussi, multiplie des crédits d'urgence à l'égard des pays du Sud. Et donc, ces 2 puissantes interventions font qu'il n'y a pas suspension généralisée de paiement. On a eu la suspension de la dette de la Zambie, du Ghana, du Sri Lanka, mais les autres exemples, bien plus nombreux, c'est des accords rapides avec le Fonds monétaire international et la Chine pour maintenir les paiements. Mais bien sûr, la conséquence, c'est que la dette continue d'augmenter et que le FMI, comme on l'a dit, impose des conditionnalités extrêmement dures. La Chine n'impose pas des conditionnalités du même type que le FMI et la Banque mondiale, mais ce qu'elle fait dans certains cas, c'est qu'elle prend le contrôle carrément de réserves, de ressources naturelles, de réserves minérales, de combustibles, voire de terre. Et donc, ce n'est pas le même type de conditionnalité que celle imposée par le Fonds monétaire international, mais finalement, ça complète ce que fait le Fonds monétaire international. Et donc, ce n'est pas une alternative. La Chine n'est pas une alternative aux politiques avancées par le Fonds monétaire international et la Banque mondiale. Deuxièmement, pour répondre à la question qui m'est posée, dans cette nouvelle situation avec ce type de créanciers, la Chine fait partie également des BRICS, on n'en a pas encore parlé, et a créé avec les autres BRICS la nouvelle banque de développement qui est basée à Shanghai et dont la présidence est assumée par Dilma Rousseff, qui a été présidente du Brésil jusqu'à son renversement en 2013. Et en fait, si on analyse ce que font les BRICS avec la nouvelle banque de développement, on se rend compte que le modèle qu'ils appliquent ressemble très fortement au modèle défendu par la Banque mondiale et le FMI, à savoir que les BRICS prêtent de l'argent principalement pour augmenter la capacité extractive des pays du Sud global et pour développer, comme dans le cas du Pakistan, des corridors d'importation, exportation dans le cadre du projet Belt and Road, donc la nouvelle route de la soie qui assure à la Chine des approvisionnements en matières premières et puis le moyen de revendre sur le marché mondial les matières premières qu'elle a transformées en produits manufacturés et dont elle inonde les marchés des pays du Sud. Et là aussi, c'est malheureusement un point commun entre la Chine et les autres puissances, c'est que ces produits, comme c'était le cas, et comme c'est encore le cas des produits manufacturés des États-Unis, des Allemands, des Français, des Britanniques et des autres puissances européennes, les produits chinois envahissent le marché des pays du Sud et vont à l'encontre des capacités de compétition des producteurs locaux. Et donc, ça conduit toute une série de pays, soit à se maintenir dans une situation, c'est le cas des pays africains, dont on ne voit, du point de vue des créanciers, comme intérêt que d'être des fournisseurs de matières premières et de main-d'œuvre sous-payés. Et donc, une politique qui maintient donc les pays du Sud, et notamment l'Afrique, dans un sous-développement structurel avec une absence de diversification industrielle. Et je termine. On a parlé, c'est très important, de la crise écologique. Et là, justement, puisque le même modèle, le modèle de la banque, de la nouvelle banque de développement et le modèle de la Banque mondiale consiste à extraire au maximum les ressources naturelles des pays du Sud pour les exporter vers les économies industrielles du Nord, dont la Chine fait partie maintenant, les effets sur le climat sont absolument dramatiques et donc touchent l'ensemble des populations du Sud. Donc on peut dire que, pour conclure, que l'action de la Banque mondiale et du FMI, contrôlée par les puissances du Nord, les puissances occidentales, qui s'ajoutent à la politique des BRICS et de la Chine, conduisent à un renforcement des facteurs qui aggravent la crise écologique et la crise climatique. D'où la nécessité, du point de vue du CADTM dont je suis le porte-parole, le CADTM c'est le Comité pour l'abolition des dettes illégitimes, nous voulons convaincre qu'il faut suspendre le paiement de la dette, nous voulons convaincre qu'il faut abolir la Banque mondiale et le FMI. Il faut arrêter de croire qu'en dialoguant avec le Fonds monétaire international et la Banque mondiale, on va les rendre réformables et on va les amener à faire de véritables concessions. Ils sont incapables de comprendre le langage du dialogue. Ils ne pourront comprendre qu'un langage dur de la part de gouvernements progressistes qui, sur la base d'une pression d'en bas, d'une pression populaire, seront amenés, ces gouvernements progressistes, à rompre avec la Banque mondiale et avec le FMI et à dire aussi aux Chinois, nous voulons renégocier radicalement les termes dans lesquels vous nous octroyez des crédits.
Thank you so much, Tariq. Please allow me to cut you short because we are really running out of time. Yeah, so thank you so much. That was very, very insightful. And I really appreciate. Thank you so much for also sharing how China are also loading their goods. A lot of goods, even from here in Kenya, where I sit, are from China. So it's like we're just in a small China here. So thank you so much for bringing out that fact. So at this point, I wish to thank all the speakers, and I see there are a number of questions in the chat, and I would like now to pass it to Tess so that she can pick up from there. Tess, please welcome.
Thank you so much, DNA, and thank you so much to all the speakers for fantastic interventions, incredibly enlightening and important on the 80th anniversary of the IMF and World Bank, especially in exposing their role, their deliberate role in the exploitation and extraction from global South countries. So we've had some fantastic questions come in from people here. Thank you so much, everybody, for sharing those questions. I'm going to prioritize the ones that I feel maybe haven't been touched on so far by the panelists. So to start with, I wanted to share a question from Nida Usman, who says, oh, sorry, that's the wrong question. I wanted to share a question from Dean, who says, in addition to debt cancellation, some have suggested needing to create a multilateral mechanism for debt negotiation at the UN, rather than the World Bank or the IMF. What do the panelists think about this idea? If it's a good idea, what would this mechanism need to include to be effective? And I'd love to start by asking May to share that question, if that's possible. Please go ahead, May.
Yeah, thank you, Tess, and thank you, Dean, for the question. So yes, we are of course aware of the limits of the United Nations, but it seems to be a better place than the opaque and narrow decision-making corridors of the IMF and the World Bank. I know a handful of rich countries making decisions for the rest of the world. So we are actually working or promoting the idea of the adoption of a UN Framework Convention on Sovereign Debt. So actually, debt cancellation would be one of its areas of work, because it includes what do we do with the debt problem. So that involves all sorts of measures, which can range from suspension to restructuring to outright cancellation, and would also include giving really a hard look, scrutinizing the kinds of loans that have been contracted and how if their illegitimacy can be established, and then that provides a basis for outright a call for outright cancellation, especially where corruption or some illegality was involved in forging those loan deals. No? So it's one area where we can raise our voices. That includes debt cancellation. Also shine a light on the inequality, the inequality in power relations that allows the few rich countries to make decisions, while the borrowing countries are often blamed for putting themselves in this condition of deep indebtedness. So that's always been the asymmetrical relationship, where we are asked as Global South to, practice good governance and weed out corruption, and then the lenders do not recognize their own responsibility, responsibility for the lack of diligence in examining the borrowing countries for capacity to pay. And now they're often throwing it back to us, blaming us for the condition that we've supposedly put ourselves in. So this is space that we hope learning also from how the tax convention was adopted, learning from that process, and perhaps looking at this space as also another way that we can raise the issue of debt and illegitimate debts as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, May. Farooq or Eric, is there anything you'd like to add to that?
Go on, Eric.
Sorry? Vous voulez que...
No, go on, please.
Ah, ok. En tant que CADTM, nous ne sommes pas favorables à la perspective d'un mécanisme multilatéral parce que nous pensons que c'est la poursuite d'une chimère, la poursuite d'une illusion. Nous croyons, sur la base de ce qui s'est passé réellement dans l'histoire, que les solutions viennent d'une décision souveraine, unilatérale, de pays endettés ou de pays créanciers. Et je vais vous donner 3 exemples des 20 dernières années. C'est l'exemple de l'Équateur en 2007-2008. Et en tant que porte-parole du CADTM, j'étais associé à la commission d'audit créée par le gouvernement de l'Équateur en 2007. Nous avons analysé pendant 14 mois toutes les dettes réclamées à l'Équateur et sur la base de l'audit qui a été réalisé avec la participation des délégués et délégués des mouvements sociaux de l'Équateur, le gouvernement équatorien a suspendu unilatéralement le paiement de la dette qu'il a considérée comme illégitime et illégale. Et il a gagné contre les créanciers. Il a obtenu une réduction radicale de la dette en rachetant sur le marché secondaire avec une décote de 70% les titres de sa dette. Ça, c'est l'exemple de l'Équateur. Le deuxième exemple, c'est l'Islande. L'Islande,
Eric, I'm so sorry. I'm really sorry, but I'm just gonna come to Farooq next because I realize we've only got 5 minutes left. I want to make sure everyone gets a chance to respond to the question, if that's okay. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, thanks, Tess. Given the history of UN, particularly in the present situation where they have been proved as an important international institution, particularly the case of Palestine, the way they have behaved, they have not been able to implement any of their own resolutions. I doubt that if UN can play any significant role in debt issue. So we have to discuss that more in details. But I think that the way UN has behaved in the past as well, on many occasions, it's always more talk, less implementation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Farooq. So I realize we just have a few minutes left, which is a shame because there's so many questions that I'd love to explore with everybody. But I wanted to end on offering people a space or opportunities to do something about the role of the IMF and the World Bank. And before I share some of the things that are going on right now in the global debt space, I just wanted to come to you, May, one last time and ask if there are any examples of movements or efforts for resistance against the IMF or the World Bank that have been successful in any way that we can draw inspiration from?
Yeah, so there are many examples. This is not, when we say gains, we should not only look at, really visible gains, but how these struggles build on each other and how we raise the discourse globally and really eroding the relevance and debunking the legitimacy of these institutions. But one case that I can cite is the case of the Tata Mundra plant in India, for which the Center for Financial Accountability, together with communities, filed a case to sue the International Finance Corporation, which is one of the World Bank Group's members. And They raised the issue of the illegitimate debt that funded the Tata Mundra plant, a coal-fired power plant in India. And so they actually won a decision from the US Supreme Court that the immunity claimed by these IFIs cannot be used. Eventually, it was overturned by the federal court, but the time that was used in that process really raised awareness and, you know, really projected the IFIs as violating their own environmental standards, their own safeguards that was they said that they comply with. So that's one example and one way of also struggle, no? One form. Thanks.
Yes, I can cite one small example as well. In Pakistan, there was a great price hike of electricity, and the people of Kashmir, the Pakistani part of Kashmir, they launched a campaign that we are producing electricity in Kashmir. We should be paid. We should only pay 3 rupees for 1 unit. At this time, they were paying 70 rupees for 1 unit. So there was a great mass movement which reached the capital of Kashmir in Muzaffarabad, and then few people were killed by the government, but then they took over the whole city, and whole Kashmir rebelled against the conditionality of IMF, and the result was the government announced that yes, we are just sending 23 billion rupees as subsidy to Kashmir. Your electricity price will be 3 rupees. So look at, in Punjab, we are paying 70 rupees, but in Kashmir, they are paying only 3 rupees for 1 unit. That's because of the mass movement, the success of mass movement in Kashmir. We are trying to build that, and we are going to hold another mass meeting in Lahore, planning against the conditionality, and also addressing a press conference in 2 days' time on this issue.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Farooq. And Eric, just coming to you one last time, just in 30 seconds, have you got any examples of resistance that we can pull from?
Juste dire que je suis tout à fait d'accord avec mes des Philippines pour dire que la condamnation de la société financière internationale par la justice des États-Unis suite à une plainte des habitants de l'État du Gujarat en Inde est un exemple à suivre. Deuxièmement, je parlais de l'Équateur. L'Équateur a expulsé le représentant permanent de la Banque mondiale en 2007 avec succès. Et en 2019, le peuple équatorien s'est soulevé contre un plan imposé par le Fonds monétaire international qui a dû être totalement abandonné par le gouvernement de Lénine Moreno. Donc, nous avons des exemples des dernières années qui montrent qu'il est possible d'imposer des défaites, même si c'est partiel, à ces grandes institutions internationales.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And it's wonderful to end on a note of hope that we can come together and pull on our power together to stop these institutions. So the very last few things I want to say are that there are things happening all the way around today, all the way around the world today on the 80th anniversary of the IMF and World Bank, targeting them and calling for their abolishment. So a few things to share is there is a new campaign that's launched today called Stop the IMF World Bank that's been launched by Jubilee South, CADTM and others. And you can support that by going to the link that I am just putting in the chat now. There are also a number of other things happening today. So today is the Global Day of Action against the IMF and World Bank, organized by IBON International. APMDD will be hosting a webinar on the 6th of August between 4 to 6 p.m. Philippines time on the IMF World Bank policies and their impact on Asian countries. And there'll be more information on that circulated soon, so keep an eye out. And MENAFEM have also published a fantastic series of blogs today exploring the broken promises of the IMF and World Bank from a feminist perspective. So I will post all of these things in the chat now, so you have that information. And lastly, just to say an absolutely enormous thank you to the panelists for joining us. It's been a fantastic session. I've learnt loads and I hope everyone else has too. A huge thank you to the translators. It's an incredibly difficult job doing this and your work is invaluable in making these spaces accessible. A huge thank you to Debt for Climate for all of the work that goes into organising these webinars, which again is a lot of work, more than it seems. And again, thank you everybody for joining us today. It's been a really fantastic session. I hope everybody's enjoyed the session, learnt lots, and keep an eye out for the recordings if you want to listen again to anything that's been discussed. Thank you so much, everyone, and have a great rest of the day.